On a fog-soaked morning outside a quiet coastal police station, a wounded German Shepherd puppy did something no one could explain. He ignored food, he ignored shelter, and instead, he chose one man, a broken Navy SEAL walking away from war, and began pulling him toward the darkest place in the city. What that tiny dog was trying to reveal would uncover a kidnapping ring, save a dying child, and give two forgotten souls a second chance at life. What happens next will make you believe in quiet miracles and second chances for the forgotten. Before we begin, tell me where you are watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. If you believe no child or animal should ever face fear alone, hit subscribe now and share this story with someone who needs hope. Harina Bay, Oregon, woke slowly beneath a ceiling of iron-colored clouds. The Pacific pressed against the docks with a steady, unforgiving rhythm, and fog rolled in from the water like an old habit the town could never break. Even in late spring, the air carried winter's bite, salted and sharp, crawling through coats and settling into bones. Fishing boats rocked at their moorings, ropes creaking, gulls crying as if rehearsing grief before the day had properly begun. The city itself was a narrow ribbon of streets wedged between forested hills and the restless sea. Warehouses leaned toward one another like tired men sharing secrets. Storefront windows were still dark. Only the harbor police station showed signs of life, a squat brick building with one flickering light above its front doors. Lieutenant Caleb Ward walked the length of the pier with hands tucked into the pockets of his faded Navy jacket. He moved with the unmistakable posture of someone trained never to be surprised. Tall without seeming imposing, broad through the shoulders, he carried himself with a careful economy of motion, as if every step had once been practiced on sand and steel decks. His hair, once black, had begun to silver at the temples, cut short in a style that belonged more to habit than fashion. A narrow scar curved along his jawline, half hidden by a day's worth of dark stubble. His eyes, gray, watchful, permanently alert, belonged to a man who had seen too much darkness to ever walk casually through the light. Caleb had been a Navy SEAL for nearly 17 years. Explosions, night raids, deserts, jungles. The slow erosion of trust and sleep. Those chapters now lived quietly behind his ribs. A shoulder injury and a doctor's firm voice had ended his active duty 6 months earlier. Officially, he was on medical leave. Unofficially, he was a man trying to learn how to exist in a world that did not expect him to carry a weapon. Every morning, he walked the pier at dawn. The rhythm of the sea steadied him. The cold cleared his head. It was the only hour when the ghosts were polite enough to keep their distance. That morning, something else was waiting. He noticed the dog before he heard it. At the foot of the harbor police station steps sat a young German Shepherd, no more than 8 months old, too thin, too still. Its black and tan fur was tangled and dulled by salt and dirt, one ear standing at attention while the other folded halfway, uncertain of its duty. Its ribs showed faintly beneath its coat. A frayed red collar hung loose around its neck, empty of tags. The dog did not bark. It did not whine. It simply watched Caleb. There was an unsettling intelligence in its gaze, dark amber eyes that tracked him with patient intensity, as if measuring something far beyond his height and weight. When he passed without stopping, the dog rose silently and followed 2 steps behind. Caleb felt it before he heard it. Years of training had carved that awareness into him like a second spine. He stopped. The dog stopped. He turned. The dog sat again, tail low, posture respectful. No fear, no aggression, only expectation. Caleb frowned slightly. Stray dogs were common near the docks, but they rarely approached strangers so calmly. He crouched, careful not to startle it. "Morning, sailor," he said softly. The dog did not move closer. Instead, it leaned forward and gently closed its teeth around the hem of his jacket. Not biting, holding, a tug, small, deliberate. Caleb blinked. "Well, that's new." He expected the dog to panic when he moved, but it only tightened its grip. Eyes fixed on his face, ears trembling with restrained urgency. There was something almost human in the way it looked at him. Not hunger, not curiosity, need. Caleb straightened slowly. The dog released the fabric and stepped backward, then forward again, repeating the motion like a question. "You lost, boy?" Caleb murmured. The dog turned, took 3 steps toward the street, then stopped and looked back at him. A silent invitation. Behind them, the police station door opened. Officer Martha Keene stepped outside with a paper cup of coffee in hand. In her early 40s, short and solid, with cropped blonde hair and a face permanently weathered by wind and long shifts, Martha had the practical calm of someone who trusted routine more than hope. She squinted at the scene. "That yours?" Caleb shook his head. "First time seeing him." "Huh." She took a sip. "We get strays sometimes. Animal control won't be until 9. The dog whined softly and tugged at Caleb's jacket again, more insistently now. Martha raised an eyebrow. "Looks like he picked you." Caleb hesitated. He had almost kept walking. He should have. Men like him learned early not to chase mysteries without orders. But something in the dog's eyes unsettled him, a sharpness that reminded him of men who ran toward danger because someone else could not. "All right," he said quietly. "Easy." He took one step forward. The dog turned and walked, not ran, walked with purpose. Caleb followed. They moved away from the station, past shuttered cafes and empty benches wet with fog. The dog led him across Harbor Street, weaving between parked trucks, pausing at every corner to check that Caleb still followed. He noticed more details now. A faint smear of dried blood on the dog's front paw. Tiny scratches along its muzzle, as if it had chewed through something rough. Its breathing, fast but controlled, not panicked, determined. Caleb's unease deepened. They reached the edge of the commercial district, where the harbor gave way to old warehouses and abandoned canneries. The fog thickened here, swallowing sound. A torn backpack lay beside a dumpster, one strap ripped clean off. Caleb stopped. The dog barked once, sharp and urgent, then darted toward an alley. His pulse quickened. "Hey," he whispered, "slow down." But the dog was already pulling ahead, leading him past rusted gates and weeds that cracked beneath their boots. At the mouth of a narrow passage behind an abandoned cannery, the dog halted. From inside came a sound so faint Caleb almost missed it. A sob, not animal, human. Small. Caleb's breath caught. The dog looked back at him. For the first time, fear showed clearly in its eyes. And trust. Caleb did not hesitate again. He stepped into the shadowed passage, following the dog into the cold, uncertain dark, unaware that the quiet morning had already chosen him for something far greater than a walk along the pier. The sea continued to pound against the docks, and somewhere beneath the cannery, a child waited. The passage behind the abandoned cannery swallowed sound, as if the fog itself had learned to breathe. Caleb moved slowly, one hand brushing the damp brick wall, the other hovering near the small knife clipped inside his jacket. The dog padded ahead with careful steps, claws clicking faintly against the concrete, its tail held low but steady. The smell inside the tunnel was sharp with rust and stagnant water, layered with something sweeter that did not belong underground. The sob came again. Soft. Broken. The kind of sound that belonged to someone trying very hard not to be heard. Caleb stopped, every muscle tightening. "Easy," he whispered to the dog, though it was the one steadying him now. "Lead." The dog crept forward and turned sharply left into a low-service corridor where the ceiling dipped and old pipes ran like ribs overhead. The crying grew clearer, edged with a cough, then a whispered plea that barely shaped into words. Caleb's breath slowed the way it had before breaches in foreign cities. Fear, he knew, had a rhythm. So did hope. The corridor ended at a rusted steel door, its hinges eaten halfway through by years of salt. The dog nosed it, then scratched once, sharply, as if announcing their arrival. Caleb placed his ear against the metal. Inside, breathing. Shallow, a child's. He pushed. The door groaned open into a storage room that smelled of mold and oil. Crates lay stacked unevenly, some broken, others marked with faded shipping stamps from a decade ago. In the far corner, tied to a steel support beam with plastic restraints, sat a boy. He could not have been older than 10. His hair, dark blonde and matted with sweat, clung to a pale forehead bruised purple along one temple. One sleeve of his sweatshirt had been torn away, exposing skin mottled with dirt and rope burns. His knees were pulled to his chest, as if trying to fold himself smaller than fear allowed. When he saw Caleb, his breath hitched. For one suspended second, neither of them moved. Then the dog sprinted forward. The boy's face collapsed in relief. "Valor," he whispered, voice cracking like thin ice. The dog leapt into his lap, whining, licking his cheek, tail beating frantic joy against the floor. Caleb knelt quickly, scanning the room before approaching. No movement, no voices, only dripping pipes and the child's ragged breathing. "It's okay," Caleb said quietly, his voice softer than he remembered it being capable of. "You're safe now." The boy stared at him, as if the word itself were something fragile. "Are you... police?" "Not today," Caleb said. "But I'm here." He cut the plastic restraints with one swift motion. The boy gasped when blood rushed back into his wrists, biting his lip to keep from crying out. Caleb slipped off his jacket and draped it over the boy's shoulders. "What's your name?" "Noah," he whispered. "I'm Caleb." Noah nodded, eyes never leaving him. They said not to trust anyone." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Where are they now?" Noah shook his head. "They left early. Said they'd come back." The dog growled low, a sound so deep it startled even itself. Caleb stood and moved to the door, peering down the corridor. Still nothing. He turned back. "Can you stand?" Noah tried. His legs trembled violently and buckled. Caleb caught him before he fell. "Okay," he murmured. "We'll take it slow." As he lifted the boy, he noticed something else. A thin black device half hidden beneath a crate. A small camera, blinking faintly red. Watching. Caleb ripped it free and crushed it beneath his heel. His pulse spiked. Whoever had done this had not planned to lose sight of their hostage. They moved through the corridor, the dog trotting close, glancing nervously behind them every few steps. Outside, the fog still pressed heavy against the docks, the world unchanged, indifferent to what had almost vanished beneath it. Caleb emerged into the alley and paused. A man stood near the mouth of Harbor Street. He had not been there before, mid-30s, tall and lean, dark beard trimmed close to his jaw, wearing a brown canvas jacket and work boots scuffed by long days. His hands rested casually in his pockets, but his eyes were sharp, too sharp for a dock worker. The man's gaze slid from Caleb to the boy in his arms. Something flickered. Recognition, then calculation. Caleb turned slightly, angling his body so Noah was shielded behind his shoulder. The man smiled. "Morning," he said pleasantly, voice carrying the flat calm of someone practiced at lying. Caleb nodded once. "Morning?" The man took a step closer. The dog barked, not loud. A warning. The man stopped. His eyes narrowed at the dog, then returned to Caleb. "Didn't mean to scare you, just looking for my truck. Broke down around here last night." Caleb held his gaze, silent. Years ago, in a village halfway across the world, a man had smiled at him the same way moments before, pulling a trigger. "You won't find it here," Caleb said evenly. The man's jaw tightened. "You sure?" "Very." For a long moment, fog and silence pressed around them. Then, somewhere in the distance, a harbor horn sounded. The man exhaled slowly, stepped back. "All right, no trouble." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the mist. Caleb did not move until the sound of footsteps faded completely. Then he whispered, "We're leaving. Now." He carried Noah toward the police station, heart hammering, the dog close at his heels. Inside the station, Officer Martha Keene looked up from the front desk. Her coffee spilled. "Oh my God!" Caleb laid Noah gently across the front bench. "Call an ambulance and detectives, right now." Martha moved instantly, voice snapping orders into the phone. As medics arrived, wrapping Noah in blankets and checking his pulse, Caleb finally crouched beside the dog. "You did good," he murmured. The dog leaned into his hand, trembling now that the danger had passed. A paramedic, a young man with freckles and nervous eyes, paused beside them. "Is that your dog?" Caleb shook his head. "No, he belongs to the boy." The paramedic nodded slowly. "Smart dog." Caleb watched as Noah was wheeled out toward the ambulance, Valor trying to follow until a nurse gently guided him back. Noah reached out weakly. "Don't let him go." Caleb clipped a leash from the wall to the dog's collar. "I won't." Outside, as sirens faded into the fog, Caleb realized something with a chill deeper than the ocean air. The man in the alley had not looked surprised. He had looked disappointed. Whatever had begun beneath the cannery was not finished, not even close. The emergency entrance of Harina Bay General glowed like a ship in fog, its automatic doors breathing open and shut as paramedics rushed through with practiced urgency. Caleb followed the gurney carrying Noah, his long strides matching the wheel's rhythm, Valor trotting anxiously beside him with the leash looped around Caleb's wrist. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and overheated coffee, a sterile sharpness that cut through the lingering scent of salt still clinging to his clothes. Noah's face had gone pale beneath the fluorescent lights, freckles standing out against skin that no longer held the warmth of fear, but the chill of exhaustion. A nurse pressed gently on his forehead, murmuring reassurances while a doctor with silver hair and kind eyes examined the bruise at his temple. Possible concussion, the doctor said quietly to the paramedics. Get him into imaging. Caleb stopped at the threshold. I'll wait here, he said, though every instinct in him wanted to follow. Noah's fingers tightened weakly around Valor's collar. Please, don't let him go. Caleb knelt and placed a steady hand over the boys. He's not going anywhere, I promise. Valor whined softly and licked Noah's knuckles once before the gurney disappeared down the corridor. Caleb straightened, suddenly aware of how heavy the building felt. Hospitals always did. Too many beginnings and endings under one roof. A woman stood a few steps away, staring at him as if trying to decide whether to run or fall apart. She was tall and slender, her posture rigid with shock. Dark auburn hair pulled hastily into a knot that left loose strands trembling against her cheeks. Her face bore the kind of beauty that came from precision rather than softness. High cheekbones, narrow jaw, eyes sharp and gray-green. She wore a navy blazer over jeans, office clothes wrinkled from hours of waiting, and clutched her phone as if it were the only solid thing left in the world. When she spoke, her voice shook. Is he alive? Caleb nodded. Yes, he's being checked, but he's stable. Her knees buckled. He caught her before she hit the floor. I'm sorry, she whispered, gripping his jacket. I'm Sarah Pierce. I'm his mother. He guided her to a chair. Caleb Ward. She wiped her face quickly, trying to recover dignity from terror. They called me from the police station. They said a man found him. It was your dog, Caleb said gently. She looked up sharply. Valor? Caleb nodded. He led me to him. For a moment, she simply stared, disbelief softening into something dangerously close to gratitude. A tall man entered then, moving fast despite the limp in his right leg. He was broad-shouldered, with dark hair cut short, and a beard that shadowed a square jaw lined by fatigue. His eyes, deep brown and hollowed by weeks of sleeplessness, scanned the room until they found Sarah. "Where is he?" he demanded, voice rough. "Ethan," Sarah said, standing and clinging to him. "He's alive. He's alive!" This was Ethan Pierce, Caleb realized, the father. Ethan turned to Caleb, studying him with the wary focus of someone accustomed to solving problems alone. "You're the one who found him." "Yes." Ethan nodded once. A soldier's acknowledgement without ceremony. "Thank you." Not gratitude yet. Trust came later. Detective Ronan Hale arrived minutes after, coat still dusted with fog. Hale was in his early 50s, lean and angular, with iron-gray hair and a mustache trimmed so precisely it looked carved. A deep crease cut between his brows, the mark of a man who had learned to expect the worst long before it arrived. Rumor said he'd lost his partner in a warehouse shooting years ago, and since then, every case became personal. He took Caleb aside near the vending machines. "Walk me through it," Hale said. Caleb described the tunnel, the restraints, the camera, the man in the alley. Hale's eyes hardened at the mention of the bearded stranger. "You get a good look? Enough to remember him. Good. We pulled traffic cams from Harbor Street. Someone in a brown jacket was pacing there this morning." Caleb's jaw tightened. "They were watching." "Yes, and they're organized." From the corner, Valor growled softly, ears pricked. Caleb followed his gaze. A man stood near the far wall, pretending to read a notice board. Mid-40s, average height, thinning hair, wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a gray windbreaker and carried a messenger bag slung too carefully across his chest. His posture was casual, but his eyes flicked too often toward the hallway where Noah had vanished. Hale noticed. "You see him too." The man turned suddenly and walked out. Hale cursed under his breath and signaled an officer. "Check him." Too late. The door slid shut behind the stranger. Caleb exhaled slowly. "They're still close." "Yes," Hale said grimly. "And now they know the boy is alive?" A nurse approached then. "Mr. and Mrs. Pierce, you can see him now." Sarah nearly ran. Inside the recovery room, Noah lay beneath warm blankets, eyes half open, a bandage wrapped gently around his head. When he saw his parents, his lips trembled. "Mom?" Sarah sobbed and pressed kisses into his hair. Ethan gripped his son's hand with shaking strength. Noah's gaze drifted to Caleb. "You came back." "I said I would." Then his eyes fell to Valor. The dog trotted forward, tail wagging uncertainly. Noah smiled for the first time. Sarah gasped softly. "Valor, you saved him?" Later, when Noah slept under the watch of monitors and nurses, Hale pulled Ethan aside. "We need to ask about your work," he said quietly. Ethan stiffened. Sarah overheard. "What does that have to do with this?" Hale lowered his voice. "We think your son was leverage." Ethan closed his eyes. Caleb caught the look and understood. In another corridor, far from the family, Hale spoke plainly. "You're a cybersecurity contractor for the Navy. Classified projects. Someone tried to get to you through your son." Ethan nodded slowly. 2 weeks ago, I refused to sell access codes. I thought they'd move on." "They didn't," Hale said. Caleb leaned against the wall, anger simmering beneath his calm. Children had always been off limits in his world. "What now?" Sarah whispered. "Now," Hale said, "we protect your family, and we find who ordered this." That night, after statements and paperwork and long silences, the Pierces were moved to a guarded room upstairs. Caleb remained in the hallway, Valor asleep at his feet, finally exhausted. Hale joined him. "You're not a cop," the detective said, "but you handled this like one." Caleb shrugged. "Old habits." Hale studied the dog. "You keeping him?" "He's not mine." "Not yet," Hale said. Before leaving, Sarah approached him. "Mr. Ward, thank you. I don't know how to repay—" "You already did," Caleb said, glancing at Valor. She smiled faintly through tears. As he stepped outside into the cold night, Caleb realized something else. The ocean sounded different now, less empty. And somewhere in the city, men who had failed once were deciding what to do next. Morning arrived in Harina Bay without mercy. Rain had replaced fog, a cold, steady curtain that washed the sidewalks and turned the harbor into a sheet of hammered steel. Caleb stood beneath the hospital's overhang, collar pulled up, Valor pressed against his leg, watching the drops collect and fall in thin, relentless lines. He had not slept. He had not tried. Inside, Noah was stable, protected, guarded by 2 uniformed officers posted outside his room, both young, both pretending not to be afraid. That did not calm Caleb. Fear, he knew, did not leave when danger paused. It simply learned to wait. Detective Ronan Hale emerged through the sliding doors, coat button crooked, coffee untouched in his hand. His face looked older in daylight, lines deeper, eyes carrying the weight of a night spent arguing with invisible enemies. "You still here?" Hale said. "Someone has to be," Caleb replied. Hale nodded, glancing down at Valor. "Dog's famous upstairs. Nurses are calling him a guardian angel." "He earned it." Hale hesitated, then motioned toward the parking lot. "Walk with me." They moved between rows of wet cars, the hospital rising behind them like a quiet fortress. Hale stopped near an unmarked sedan, rain tracing slow paths across its hood. "We found the man from the hospital," Hale said. Caleb's spine tightened. "Alive?" "Yes. Name's Martin Keel, former logistics contractor. Fired 3 years ago for falsifying transport records. No violent history, but debts, gambling mostly. And he was watching Noah. He admitted it, said he was paid to report movements, nothing else." "Who paid him?" Hale shook his head. "Cash, burner phone." "He never met them." Caleb exhaled slowly. "Middlemen. Always." Hale studied him. "You're not as removed from this as you think." Caleb met his gaze. Explain. Hale opened the trunk and pulled out a thin folder, already damp at the edges. Inside were grainy photographs printed from traffic cameras. One showed the brown-jacketed man from the alley. Another showed a dark SUV parked 2 blocks from the cannery. And the third? Caleb stared. The image was old, years old, but unmistakable. A younger Caleb Ward stood outside a compound gate in Afghanistan, helmet under his arm, beard thicker, eyes harder. Behind him, blurred by dust, was a convoy truck. And beside that truck, a man with the same sharp cheekbones and trimmed beard as the stranger in the fog. Hale's voice was low. Recognize him? Caleb closed his eyes. His name's Victor Rains, Hale continued. Former intelligence asset. Disappeared off the grid 5 years ago. Last known work, special acquisitions, kidnapping, leverage, coercion, your kind of battlefield. Caleb's jaw tightened painfully. He wasn't supposed to survive Kandahar. Hale raised an eyebrow. You met him. Once, Caleb said. Long enough to know he never forgets a face. Rain drummed harder. He saw you, Hale said quietly. In that alley. That wasn't coincidence. Caleb felt the past shift inside him like an old wound reopening. Why come here? He asked. Hale tapped the folder. Because Ethan Pierce isn't the only one who refused to sell data. 3 contractors across the coast said no this month. 2 of their families were threatened. 1 vanished. Caleb's breath went cold. They're building something, Hale said. And they're running out of patience. From behind them came a voice, calm and measured. Then you better stop them fast. They turned. The speaker was a man in his late 40s, tall, broad, with shoulders that filled his charcoal coat easily. His hair was silver at the temples, beard neatly trimmed, eyes the pale blue of winter glass. He walked with a faint stiffness in his left knee, the kind that came from old injuries never quite forgiven. Who are you? Hale asked sharply. The man produced a badge. Commander Lucas Brandt, Naval Intelligence. Caleb's stomach sank. Brandt looked at him with something like recognition, then nodded once. Lieutenant Ward, I was told you'd be here. Hale bristled. This is a police matter. Brandt smiled thinly. Not anymore. They moved into the hospital's quiet administrative wing. Rain muffled against high windows. Brandt spoke without preamble. Victor Rains is running a private extraction ring, he said. They steal children of cleared personnel, apply pressure, force data transfers. Offshore buyers, foreign and domestic. Hale swore softly. We tracked him to Oregon 3 weeks ago, Brandt continued, then lost him until last night. He slid a tablet across the table. A satellite image showed an abandoned horse ranch 20 miles north of the city. Caleb noticed it immediately, the layout, the barns, the tree line. I trained there, he said quietly. Brandt's eyes sharpened. Then you know it's blind spots. Hale stiffened. You're not recruiting civilians. Brandt shook his head. I'm asking for help. Caleb laughed once, humorless. I'm not active duty. No, Brandt said gently. But you're the only man Rains will recognize before he runs. Silence stretched. From the hallway came the soft click of claws. Valor stood in the doorway, ears forward, eyes fixed on Brandt. The commander noticed. Good dog, Valor growled, low, deep. Brandt paused. He doesn't like me. Caleb said nothing. They ended the meeting with uneasy agreement. Police would surveil the ranch. Naval intelligence would prepare a warrant. Caleb would wait. He hated waiting. That afternoon, while rain softened into mist again, Caleb visited Noah. The boy slept, color slowly returning to his cheeks. Sarah sat beside the bed, hair loose now, exhaustion etched into every line. He keeps asking for you, she said softly. Caleb smiled faintly and sat. Valor jumped gently onto the bed, curling near Noah's feet. When the boy woke, his first word was, Did they catch them? Not yet, Caleb said. But we're close. Noah nodded seriously as if this were simply another fact to memorize. Valor was scared in the tunnel. I was too. Noah studied him. But you came anyway. Caleb swallowed. Later, as evening bled into gray, Ethan approached him in the hallway. You were military, Ethan said. Yes. You know how this ends, Ethan said quietly. They won't stop. No, Caleb agreed. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then let me help. You help by staying alive. Ethan nodded reluctantly. Outside, Caleb knelt and checked Valor's paws, cleaning the cuts gently. You didn't have to follow me, he murmured. Valor licked his hand. As night fell, Caleb stood by the window watching the city lights shimmer through mist. Somewhere north, horses stamped in dark barns, and men prepared their next move. And for the first time since leaving war behind, Caleb realized the battlefield had followed him home. The road north of Harina Bay narrowed as it climbed, asphalt giving way to cracked gravel that wound through dark fir forests and open fields scarred by old fences. By the time Caleb reached the final bend, the rain had stopped, but the sky remained low and heavy, pressing against the hills as if trying to smother whatever secrets lay beneath them. The abandoned ranch appeared slowly through the mist. Once, it had been beautiful. White rail fences still traced the land in broken lines, and a long barn crouched near the center of the property, like an animal grown old and tired of standing. The farmhouse leaned slightly to one side, windows boarded unevenly, paint peeling in pale curls that flapped softly in the wind. Beyond it stretched a training ring and several smaller sheds, their doors hanging open like unanswered questions. Caleb parked his truck a quarter-mile away and continued on foot. Valor walked beside him, silent now, ears lifted, every muscle alert. In daylight, the dog looked younger than his courage suggested, still thin, coat not yet fully grown, one ear stubbornly refusing to stand straight. But his eyes had changed since the tunnel. They no longer held only fear. They held intent. Caleb crouched at the edge of the tree line and studied the ranch through binoculars. 2 vehicles were parked near the barn, a black SUV and a rusted pickup with mismatched doors. A generator hummed faintly somewhere behind the farmhouse. Thin smoke rose from a chimney that should not have been in use, not abandoned, waiting. He clicked his radio once, low. "Hale, I'm in position." Static, then the detective's voice. "Copy. We've got 2 unmarked units circling south. Intelligence team is 10 minutes out. You're not supposed to go in alone." Caleb did not answer. He eased forward, keeping to the tall grass, letting the land hide him the way deserts and jungles once had. The closer he came, the more he noticed the details that did not belong. Fresh tire tracks cutting across old mud, boot prints leading toward the barns, a camera half hidden in a tree line, lens angled toward the road. He marked them all. Behind the main barn, a horse shifted in its stall, hooves scraping nervously against wood. Caleb paused. The animal was a chestnut mare, tall and narrow, ribs faintly visible beneath her coat. A white blaze ran down her face, crooked and uneven. She tossed her head when she saw him, eyes wide and dark, nostrils flaring as if she had already learned to fear men. Caleb spoke softly. "Easy. Girl." Valor moved closer, tail low, head tilted. The mare snorted, then settled, recognizing something calmer than danger. A door creaked inside the barn. Caleb froze. A man stepped out. He was older than Caleb expected, late 50s, perhaps early 60s, tall but stooped slightly at the shoulders, as if years had bent him forward. A gray beard framed a mouth set permanently into a line of irritation, and his hair, long and unkempt, was tied at the nape with a strip of leather. He wore overalls over a flannel shirt, boots stained with mud and oil. This was not a soldier. This was a caretaker. The man walked slowly toward the stalls, muttering to himself, carrying a bucket that sloshed faintly with water. Caleb watched his hands. They shook, not from age, from nerves. The man reached the mare and poured water into a trough, glancing around as if expecting someone to shout at him for moving too slowly. "Quiet, Belle," he whispered hoarsely. "They don't like noise." They. Caleb's jaw tightened. The caretaker lingered, then shuffled back toward the farmhouse. When the door closed, Caleb moved again. He circled the barn and slipped through a side entrance where a plank had fallen loose from its frame. Inside, the air smelled of hay, oil, and fear. 2 more stalls held horses, one a young black gelding, restless and stamping, the other empty but recently used, fresh straw scattered across the floor. Voices drifted from the far end. "Said tonight," one voice murmured. A second answered, colder. "No delays, Rains wants it done." Caleb felt the name settle into him like a blade. He crept closer, peering through a crack between boards. Inside a makeshift office built from plywood and stolen desks stood three men. The first was the one from the alley, Victor Rains. Time had sharpened him. He stood tall and straight, shoulders relaxed in the posture of someone who never expected to lose control. His beard was trimmed close now, streaked with silver, cheekbones cut hard beneath skin, weathered by deserts and secrets. His eyes were pale and flat, the kind that reflected light without ever returning warmth. The second man was younger, broad and thick-necked, scars webbing his knuckles and forearms. He leaned against a desk, chewing gum loudly, eyes empty. The third was unfamiliar, thin, nervous, hair too neatly parted, hands clasped as if praying. "We have the data courier arriving tonight," Rains said calmly. "If Pierce won't sell, we take what we need." "And the kid?" the scarred man asked. Rains did not look at him. "No longer necessary." Caleb's fingers tightened. The nervous man swallowed. "You said no bodies." Rains turned. Slowly, when he spoke, his voice barely rose above a whisper. "I said no witnesses." Silence fell. Behind Caleb, Valor growled. Soft, but loud enough. Rains's head snapped up. For a moment, the world stopped. Rains walked to the wall and pressed his ear against the boards. Caleb stepped back, heart pounding. The caretaker's door creaked somewhere. Then a voice called from outside. "Boss?" Rains straightened. "False alarm." He glanced once more at the wall, eyes narrowing. Caleb withdrew carefully, retreating into the tall grass just as headlights swept across the barnyard. A third vehicle arrived. Caleb exhaled slowly and moved back toward the tree line, mind racing. They had a timeline. They had a courier. They had not yet realized how close he was. In the trees, a shadow moved. Caleb turned sharply. A woman stepped forward, hands raised. She was in her early 30s, athletic, dark hair braided tight against her scalp, rain jacket zipped to her chin. Her face was angular and alert, eyes a bright, calculating green. "Easy," she whispered. "I'm with Brandt." This was Agent Maya Chen, Naval Intelligence. She moved like a blade, quiet, efficient, eyes always searching. "I was tracking perimeter cams," she said. "You weren't supposed to be inside." Caleb gave a grim smile. "You're welcome." She glanced at Valor. "That the famous dog?" "He's better than most operatives I've met." Maya nodded once. "We're ready to move tonight." Surveillance team in position. Hale's bringing warrants. "And Rains?" "He'll run if he smells this." Caleb looked back at the barn. "He already smells something." They withdrew together as dusk thickened into night. From the ridge, Caleb watched the ranch light up slowly, men moving between buildings like ants in a broken nest. For the first time in years, he felt the familiar tightening in his chest. Not fear, purpose. At the hospital, Noah slept under guard. Here, in the hills, monsters prepared to finish their work. Caleb rested a hand on Valor's head. "Looks like you're not done saving people," he murmured. Valor's ears lifted. In the distance, a barn door slammed shut, and somewhere inside that ranch, Victor Rains made his first mistake. Darkness fell over the hills like a held breath. By the time the surveillance teams finished positioning themselves around the ranch, the sky had turned the color of wet charcoal, and the last traces of dusk bled slowly behind the ridgeline. Wind moved through the tall grass in cautious waves, carrying the smell of damp soil, horse sweat, and gasoline. Caleb lay prone beneath a cedar tree, the cold seeping through his jacket and into muscles that remembered too well how to wait. Valor pressed against his side, silent as shadow, ears angled toward the barns where yellow light flickered behind dusty windows. The dog's breathing was slow and measured, but his body was taut, every tendon alert. In the half-light, his young face looked older somehow, the playful softness gone, replaced by something intent and watchful. Below them, vehicles rolled quietly into place. Detective Hale crouched behind an unmarked SUV near the southern fence line, speaking into a radio with clipped precision. His trench coat hung open, revealing the vest beneath, and the old crease between his brows had deepened into a permanent furrow. To the west, Agent Maya Chen slipped between trees with two naval intelligence operators at her back, their movements fluid and rehearsed. She paused once, glanced uphill toward Caleb, and lifted two fingers, a silent confirmation that her team was in position. Farther east, near the abandoned farmhouse, a third group waited. Sheriff's deputies, younger men with nervous eyes and hands that kept adjusting their grips on unfamiliar rifles. They were ready. Inside the barn, Victor Rains was not. Caleb watched through binoculars as Rains paced the makeshift office, phone pressed to his ear, jaw tight with irritation. The scarred enforcer stood nearby, arms crossed, while the thin, nervous man shuffled papers at a desk. A pickup truck rolled through the front gate and stopped beside the barn. The courier had arrived. Caleb's pulse quickened. A man stepped out of the truck. He was short and stocky, bald head shining beneath the floodlights, thick beard braided into a single rope that hung against his chest. His face bore the heavy, flattened nose of a former boxer, and his eyes darted constantly, never resting anywhere long enough to feel safe. This was Anton Varga. Caleb recognized him from an old intelligence briefing, a former Eastern European data broker who had vanished years ago after a deal went wrong in Prague. Smart, ruthless, terrified of betrayal. Rains greeted him with a smile that never reached his eyes. They shook hands. Caleb lowered the binoculars and whispered into his radio. "Target confirmed. Courier on site." Hale's voice crackled back. "Copy. Warrants approved. We move on my mark." Inside the barn, Rains gestured for Varga to follow him toward a side room. And then something went wrong. One of the horses screamed, not a whinny, a full, panicked shriek that tore through the night. The chestnut mare burst from her stall, crashing against a half-latch gate, eyes wild, hooves striking wood in desperate rhythm. A man shouted. Lights snapped on across the ranch. Rains froze. His head lifted slowly. Caleb swore under his breath. Valor growled, low and urgent. In the barnyard, the caretaker stumbled out of the farmhouse, waving his arms wildly. "Boss, she spooked. I couldn't hold her." Rains turned on him, face darkening. "Idiot!" Then his gaze shifted, straight toward the tree line, toward Caleb. Recognition hit like a gunshot. For one terrible second, the two men locked eyes across the distance. Rains smiled and ran. "All units, go!" Hale shouted. The night exploded. Flashbangs cracked across the ranch, white light and thunder shattering silence. Deputies surged through fences, boots pounding, rifles raised. Maya's team poured through the west side of the barn, voices sharp with commands. "Federal agents on the ground!" Gunfire answered, short, violent bursts. Caleb was already moving. He slid downhill through wet grass, Valor sprinting beside him, muscles burning with a familiarity that felt almost like relief. At the barn entrance, two men raised rifles. Caleb dropped one with a precise shot, tackled the second before he could fire, driving him hard into a stack of hay bales. Valor lunged past him, snapping at a third attacker's leg, dragging the man screaming to the ground. Inside, chaos ruled. Horses kicked and reared in terror, stalls collapsing as men scrambled for cover. The scarred enforcer fired blindly down the aisle, bullets tearing splinters from beams. Maya rolled across the floor and returned fire, calm and exact, dropping him with a shot to the shoulder. Rains burst through a back door and sprinted toward the training ring. Caleb saw him and gave chase. They ran between broken fences and overturned troughs, breath tearing from lungs, boots slipping in mud. Rains was fast, but Caleb had chased men across deserts and rooftops. Distance meant nothing to him. They reached the edge of the ring. Rains turned suddenly, gun raised. Caleb dove as the shot cracked past his ear. Valor leapt. The dog slammed into Rains's leg, jaws locking around his calf with ferocious strength. Rains screamed and fired wildly, the bullet grazing Caleb's arm. Caleb tackled him. They hit the ground hard, rolling in wet dirt, fists striking, breath grunting. Rains was strong, trained, but rage had slowed him. "You should have stayed buried," Rains snarled, blood streaking his beard. Caleb drove an elbow into his ribs. "I tried." Rains reached for a hidden knife. Valor bit his wrist. Hard. The blade fell. Caleb twisted Rains's arm behind his back and slammed cuffs into place just as deputies rushed in, guns raised. "It's over," Hale shouted. Rains laughed weakly through bloodied teeth. "You think this ends with me?" Caleb said nothing. They dragged Rains away as medics rushed in to tend the wounded. In the barn, Varga had been captured, trembling and sobbing. muttering about contracts and promises, and how he never wanted children involved. The caretaker knelt beside the chestnut mare, whispering apologies, his shaking hands finally untying her halter. Near the collapsed stalls, Maya knelt by Valor, checking him carefully. "Any injuries?" she asked. Caleb knelt too, heart hammering. Valor's leg bled from a shallow cut, but he wagged his tail, proud and unbroken. "You're unbelievable," Caleb murmured. Sirens echoed through the hills as backup arrived. By midnight, the ranch was secured. Raines sat in the back of an armored van, staring at the floor. The empire he'd built in shadows finally dragged into light. Hale approached Caleb as rain began again, softer now. "We found servers in the farmhouse," he said. "Data logs, names, enough to tear the whole ring apart." Caleb nodded slowly. "And the courier?" "In custody, talking already." Hale hesitated. "You saved a lot of families tonight." Caleb looked down at Valor, who leaned against his leg, exhausted but satisfied. So did he. Hours later, as dawn crept pale and quiet over the ruined ranch, Caleb drove back toward the city. Valor curled on the passenger seat, stitched and bandaged but alive. At the hospital, Noah still slept. Caleb paused outside the window, watching the boy breathe, peaceful for the first time since the nightmare began. Behind him, Sarah whispered, "Is it over?" Caleb met her eyes. "For him," he said gently. "Yes." And for the first time since war had ended his old life, Caleb believed it. Morning did not arrive gently. It crept into Harina Bay in thin layers of gray and pale gold, slipping through hospital windows and settling softly on floors still stained with footprints from the night before. The city, exhausted from sirens and rumors, exhaled at last. For the first time in 2 days, no one was running. Caleb sat alone in the corridor outside Noah's guarded room, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped as if in prayer, though he had never been good at believing in answers. Valor lay at his feet, bandaged legs stretched carefully to one side, breathing slow and even. The dog's coat had been brushed clean by a nurse sometime before dawn, and a blue medical tag now hung from his collar, swinging faintly each time he shifted. Through the glass, Noah slept. The boy's chest rose and fell with the quiet rhythm of safety. Monitors blinking soft green light beside him. Color had returned to his face overnight, freckles warm against pale skin. A faint smile lingered at the corner of his mouth, as if even his dreams had finally learned how to rest. Sarah Pierce stood inside the room, smoothing her son's hair with slow, reverent strokes. She had not left the bedside once. Her blazer was gone, replaced by a borrowed sweater several sizes too large, sleeves covering hands that trembled only when she thought no one watched. Ethan Pierce stood at the window, staring out at the harbor, his reflection fractured in the glass. The man looked older than he had 2 nights ago. Lines cut deeper around his eyes, beard untrimmed, shoulders carrying the invisible weight of guilt that no one had accused him of, but that he wore anyway. When he stepped into the hallway, Caleb rose. "They told me," Ethan said quietly. "They caught him." "Raines?" "Yes." Ethan closed his eyes, breath unsteady. "Because of you." "And because of him," Caleb replied, nodding toward Valor. Ethan studied the dog with something like awe. "He ran through the city to find you. We thought he was lost." "He wasn't," Caleb said. "He knew exactly where he was going." Ethan hesitated, then extended his hand. This time, when Caleb took it, the gratitude was no longer cautious. "Thank you for bringing my son back," Ethan said. Caleb nodded once, unable to trust his voice. Later that morning, Detective Hale arrived with a thin folder under his arm and fatigue written openly across his face. His coat was gone, replaced by a rumpled shirt and tie loosened at the collar. There was dried blood on one cuff, not his own. "We're done for now," Hale said, leaning against the wall beside Caleb. "Raines is talking. Not much, but enough. Names, routes, accounts. Brand's people are already pulling warrants across 3 states. Caleb exhaled slowly. "Good. We found 2 more families on his list," Hale added. "Got to them in time." A weight Caleb hadn't known he was carrying lifted slightly. "And the caretaker?" Caleb asked. "Witness protection," Hale replied. "Turns out Raines threatened to kill his daughter if he didn't cooperate. Man never fired a gun in his life. Caleb nodded grimly. Hale looked down at Valor. Dog's going to make the department famous. He didn't do it for fame. No, Hale said quietly. He did it because he loved a boy. Down the corridor, voices rose in sudden excitement. A young nurse came running, nearly colliding with an older man who followed more slowly behind her. The man was tall and thin, posture bent not by age but by years of leaning over engines and drafting tables. His hair, silver and thick, was combed carefully back, and wire-rimmed glasses sat precariously on a nose that had once been broken and never properly set. His hands were stained with grease that no soap could ever quite remove. This was Thomas Pierce, Ethan's father, Noah's grandfather. He moved with quiet urgency toward the room, eyes wide with disbelief. They told me he's alive." Sarah looked up and burst into tears as he entered. Thomas knelt by the bed and took Noah's small hand in both of his, pressing it to his forehead. "Stubborn boy," he whispered, "just like your father." Noah stirred and opened his eyes. "Grandpa?" Thomas laughed through sobs. "There you are." From the doorway, Caleb watched and felt something in his chest loosen that had been tight for years. An hour later, as doctors explained recovery plans and officers adjusted security schedules, Brant appeared with Maya Chen beside him. Brant looked cleaner now, jacket pressed, silver hair neatly combed, but his eyes remained sharp, alert to dangers that no longer stood in the room. Maya carried a tablet and 2 paper files. "We finished reviewing the servers," Brant said. "The ring is dismantled. Raines was the last active coordinator." Caleb nodded. "And you," Brant continued studying him, "made that possible." "I followed a dog," Caleb replied. Maya smiled faintly. "We're recruiting the dog." Caleb raised an eyebrow. Brant folded his hands behind his back. Half joking, half serious. "That animal has instincts most trained K9s spend years developing." Valor lifted his head at the sound of Brant's voice and gave a soft, warning growl. Brant chuckled. "Still doesn't like me." Later, when the hallway finally emptied and only nurses and guards remained, Sarah approached Caleb hesitantly. "Mr. Ward," she said. "Caleb." She nodded. "Caleb, there's something I need to ask you." He waited. "Valor," she said softly. "He's been Noah's shadow since we adopted him. But after what he did, after everything—" She struggled for words. Ethan joined her. "We don't want to lose him," he said. "But we know he's more than just our dog now." Caleb felt his stomach tighten. "Noah's going to be okay," Sarah continued. "He'll go back to school. We'll protect him. But Valor has something else in him." Caleb knelt and ran a hand gently along the dog's neck. "He belongs with Noah," he said. Ethan shook his head. "He belongs where he can save more people." Caleb looked at them, stunned. Sarah's eyes shone. "We'd like you to take him?" The words struck harder than any bullet. "What?" "You understand him?" Ethan said. "He trusts you. And you're not finished yet, are you?" Caleb opened his mouth, then closed it. Images flooded back. War zones, teammates lost, years spent running from the idea of needing anyone again. "I can't replace his family," he said quietly. "No," Sarah agreed. "But you can be his partner." Silence stretched. From the bed, Noah whispered, "He can visit me." They all turned. The boy smiled faintly. "He can come back, but he should help other kids." Caleb's throat closed. He nodded slowly. If he chooses to stay." Valor stood, limped forward, and pressed his head firmly into Caleb's knee. Decision made. That afternoon, as sunlight finally burned through the clouds and warmed the hospital gardens, Caleb walked outside with Valor at his side. Reporters waited beyond the gates, cameras flashing, voices calling questions he ignored. He knelt, resting his forehead briefly against the dog's. "You're changing my life," he murmured. Valor wagged his tail. Behind them, through the window, Noah watched and raised his hand in a small wave. Caleb lifted his own in return. The war had not followed him home, but something better had. The training field lay just beyond the edge of Harina Bay, a wide stretch of damp grass bordered by fir trees and a chain-link fence that rattled softly in the coastal wind. Morning fog clung low to the ground. turning the distant obstacle courses into pale shadows and muting the sound of boots and commands into something almost reverent. Caleb stood at the gate with Valor at his side, leash wrapped twice around his wrist. The dog's bandaged leg had healed enough to walk without a limp, though the fur there was still shaved in an uneven patch, pale skin showing beneath. He looked healthier now, thicker through the chest, coat beginning to shine again. But he carried himself differently than before, head higher, eyes sharper, as if the world had finally given him a role worthy of his attention. Caleb exhaled slowly. This was the first morning he had reported anywhere in uniform since leaving the teams, not as a SEAL, as something else. The gate opened with a metallic sigh. A man waited inside. He was tall and narrow, posture straight as a drawn line, with dark brown hair cropped close and a beard trimmed so neatly it framed his angular jaw like deliberate architecture. A scar split one eyebrow, pale and smooth, the kind earned not in accidents but in moments that decided futures. His eyes were a steady hazel, observant without being intrusive, and his voice, when he spoke, carried the calm authority of someone used to teaching danger how to behave. "Lieutenant Ward," he said, offering a hand. "I'm Marcus Hale, K-9 training supervisor." Caleb shook it. "Caleb, and this is Valor." Marcus crouched immediately, extending 2 fingers for the dog to sniff. "You're the celebrity." Valor sniffed once, then sat, tail wagging cautiously. Marcus smiled faintly. "Good manners already." Behind him, the field was busy with motion. 2 German shepherds ran a tracking drill near the tree line, guided by handlers in navy jackets. Farther back, a Belgian Malinois leapt a 6-foot barrier with effortless grace. The air smelled of wet grass, leather, and anticipation. "This is a trial," Marcus said, standing, "not a promise." "I understand." Marcus studied Caleb more closely now. "Commander Brandt told me about you. Navy SEAL, injury discharge, combat background." "Medical leave," Caleb corrected quietly. Marcus nodded. "And the dog found you." "Yes." "That usually tells me more than resumes ever do." They walked together toward a quiet corner of the field. "We start with evaluation," Marcus said. "Temperament, drive, nerve." He glanced down at Valor. "Age?" 8 months, maybe 9. Marcus whistled softly. "Young for what he's done." He set a small training sleeve on the ground and motioned. "Let's see how curious he is." Valor sniffed it, pawed it, then looked up at Caleb. "Go on," Caleb murmured. The dog grabbed the sleeve and tugged, tail whipping, eyes bright. Marcus nodded approvingly. Strong bite instinct, no fear. He dropped a metal pan suddenly. The clang echoed sharply. Valor startled, then stood his ground, ears forward, scanning. No panic. Marcus's expression softened into something close to admiration. "Good nerves," he said quietly. As the morning unfolded, test after test followed. Search commands, obstacle climbs, scent trails laid through wet grass and concrete. Valor missed nothing. When a trainer hid behind stacked crates and whispered, the dog found him in seconds, nose pressed confidently to the right spot, tail wagging like a flag. Caleb watched in stunned silence. He had known the dog was special. He had not known how ready he already was. By noon, clouds broke and sunlight spilled across the field in long, golden stripes. Marcus removed his gloves and leaned against a fence. "He's not trained," he said, "but he's built for this." Caleb nodded, heart thudding. "And you," Marcus added, turning to him, "you don't handle him like a civilian." "I handled men once," Caleb replied. Marcus studied him carefully. "Why come back?" Caleb hesitated. "Because I'm afraid to be alone again. Because war left and took half of me with it. Because a dog chose me when I didn't choose myself." Out loud, he said, "Because someone still needs protecting." Marcus smiled faintly. "Fair answer." That afternoon, paperwork began, background checks, medical evaluations, temperament certifications. Commander Brandt arrived briefly, crisp and efficient, offering congratulations that sounded suspiciously like recruitment. Detective Hale stopped by with coffee and news that Raines had been formally charged on 14 counts, more arrests already underway. Even Maya Chen appeared for a moment, leaning on the fence and watching Valor leap a tunnel. "He's going to be famous," she said. "He already is. Caleb replied. Near sunset, Marcus led Caleb into a small office that smelled of old leather and pine cleaner. On the desk lay a single folder. Provisional acceptance, Marcus said. 6 months of training. If he passes, he joins the unit. And me? Marcus met his eyes. Handlers don't come separate from their dogs. Caleb closed his eyes. For the first time since leaving active duty, someone had offered him not a mission, a future. At the hospital that evening, Noah sat propped against pillows, a sketchbook balanced on his knees. He looked up when the door opened and gasped. Valor! The dog bounded forward, careful but joyful, licking Noah's hands until the boy laughed, thin and bright. Caleb sat beside the bed and told them everything. The field, the tests, the offer. Sarah covered her mouth with shaking fingers. Ethan nodded slowly, pride shining through exhaustion. Noah listened without blinking. When Caleb finished, the boy said quietly, "He's going to be a hero dog." Caleb smiled. "Only if you approve." Noah reached out and hugged Valor's neck. "You have to go," he whispered, "but you have to come back too." "I will," Caleb promised. That night, after visiting hours ended and the halls grew quiet, Caleb walked Valor down to the hospital garden. The city lights shimmered through the mist. "You ready for this?" he asked softly. Valor sat, head tilted, eyes steady. Caleb laughed under his breath. "You already are." From a window above, Noah watched them, wrapped in blankets, a small hand pressed to the glass. The next morning, the first official training day began. And for the first time in years, Caleb woke not to memories of war, but to the sound of a dog breathing beside his bed, waiting for the future. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't only a story about a brave dog and a rescued child. Maybe it was a reminder that miracles don't always come as thunder or fire from the sky. Sometimes they come on 4 trembling legs, with muddy paws, and a heart brave enough to believe in strangers. In a world that often feels loud, cruel, and unfair, God still sends his quiet answers. Through kindness, through courage, through the smallest souls who refuse to give up. If you are watching this today feeling lost, afraid, or forgotten, remember this. You are not invisible to heaven, and help may already be walking toward you, even if you cannot see it yet. May God bless you and your family. May he protect every child, every animal, and every heart that still hopes for light. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who needs encouragement. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We love reading your messages. And if you believe in quiet miracles and second chances, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us for more stories that heal the soul. Until next time, may God walk beside you always.